Boys, we did it. We finally watched Godzilla -1, and this movie holds a special place in our hearts.
That's because it has a powerful message that you don't have to be the tallest, you just have to have a big heart. And an atomic railgun.
Godzilla in this movie is the shortest incarnation in a while, but it's not just Godzilla himself that's smaller, it's the scope of the movie.
Hello everyone, I am Detective Mio.
And I'm Inspector Keto, and we're here to investigate why the smaller scale of -1 works in its favor, in a big way. Haha, puns!
But first, a quick, spoiler-free review. You can feel free to skip it if you really want to, but for you real ones, it's only going to take a couple of minutes.
The story, easily one of the best constructed stories in the Godzilla franchise, though that's not really saying too much. I think there's some pacing issues, but overall I found the story to be quite engaging.
The characters! This movie has some pretty good characters, not the most original, but for the story it works pretty well. Plus, it's nice to have characters that actually impact the story in a meaningful way, rather than just being meat puppets and cannon fodder.
I've heard some people say the acting isn't too good, or that the director didn't do a very good job, and I kinda see where they're coming from, but we disagree.
Foreign acting is different than typical Hollywood acting, so it can come off as overacting to some people, but we were pretty cool with it.
Godzilla. I like this design of Godzilla, even if it's not my personal favorite. He's pretty cool. Rather thick though, like, dang. I think his characterization is interesting because he's so angry all the time and plays into the story quite well.
The special effects! Well, for the most part, the CGI is really good. Similar in quality to Shin Godzilla, but just like Shin Godzilla, there are parts, specifically in the finale, that look a little janky. But most of the movie looks ridiculously good, and the environmental CGI is on point.
Sound. The music isn't as iconic as Shin Godzilla. I personally think Shin Godzilla has one of the best soundtracks for movies ever, but the soundtrack is still really good. I really like the atmospheric music used throughout the movie, especially in the boat chase scene. It really adds to the feel.
And in general, the sound mixing is excellent.
Wait a minute!
There's a reason that this movie has been living up to the hype, and that's because it's not just a good Godzilla movie, but just a good movie in general.
Overall, we give this movie a 9 out of 10, although this is subject to change when we see the movie again. And in short, we highly suggest seeing this movie. Now to move on to the rest of our video, where we will be analyzing why, bigger isn't always better.
A large scope story isn't necessarily a better story.
Unlike Marvel's latest movies that are all about saving the entire universe, -1 is a quote-unquote blockbuster that focuses on what's most important to all of us in our daily lives. Family, loved ones, loyalty, and purpose, amongst other even harder hitting themes such as survivor's guilt.
In the MonsterVerse, the American movie stories vary in scope. They don't focus on character nearly as much. Movies like Skull Island and Godzilla vs. Kong are definitely examples of plot-driven movies. A couple movies from the MonsterVerse with similar themes to -1 would probably be 2014 and King of the Monsters, but even the themes in those movies tend to take a back seat to the spectacle and action set pieces.
On the other hand, Shin Godzilla has a rather specific story, a bit peculiar, a bit odd. Weird. It mostly consists of a critique of the Japanese government and social political commentary. The movie really leans in what Godzilla originally intended to represent, an allegory for the fears of the Japanese people at the time. Shin Godzilla uses the same theme from the original Godzilla, just updated for the modern audience. We actually have a video dedicated to this topic, so feel free to check it out if you want to.
-1 does something somewhat similar, but instead of updating the themes, it takes us back to the time of the post-World War II Japan and develops a new narrative around those original themes. The movie features a very strong human story, where the characters are relatable and are effective at communicating their situation, the desperation of the Japanese people of the time, and how so many of them try to move on from the devastation of the war, while still fearing the return of nuclear disaster and the war itself.
After movies like Final Wars, Toho is definitely returning back to its roots with its movies that have a more thoughtful narrative and impactful themes, and this latest film has a very personal story, which is something I have been waiting for a long time in Godzilla movies. And based on the audience reception, it seems that most people agree.
Now that's not saying that people can't enjoy Shin Godzilla's somewhat cynical and political statements. It's one of my personal favorite films as well. And we're not saying that people can enjoy the less thoughtful, more action-based MonsterVerse films.
Right now, a lot of people enjoy those MonsterVerse movies in a similar way to how people enjoy the later Showa film. Pretty goofy and out there.
And legendary fanboys will trip over themselves rushing to defend against any form of criticism pointed at those movies.
Heaven forbid should you compare Toho's movies to Legendary's. They will eat you alive.
Off topic. Point being, small story can work when executed well.
Time to talk about the kaiju size.
Small Godzilla looks average size to me.
The MonsterVerse gave us the largest Godzilla at the time in 2014, standing over 350 feet tall. And afterwards, Shin Godzilla was made slightly taller, just enough to edge him out. And then later, Legendary thought, you can't have that.
Boy, ain't no way, boy. Boy, ain't no way, boy.
So then they sized up Godzilla to be even taller in 2019. In between these various movies, the Godzilla anime, Monster Planet, created a Godzilla to top them all at over 1,000 feet. I mean, seriously, for a while there, it seemed like there was some kind of kaiju arms race going on.
I suppose the main reason for Godzilla's height increase over the years is the increasing height of buildings in modern cities. -1, as a period piece, has no such weaknesses.
Other than the anime singular point, -1 is the first Godzilla to be sized down significantly within recent years. But how do these various series use Godzilla, and does he really need to be so big?
In the Monsterverse, Titans are represented as extremely imposing forces of nature that destroy incidentally. They tend to be very impersonal, one big exception of course being Kong. We need Kong. The world needs him. But their enormous size usually leads to large-scale destruction.
As we mentioned earlier, Shin Godzilla represents a large-scale natural disaster, and his size displays this. He's also rather impersonal. He's just kind of walking along, doing his thing, destroying everything in his path, but he attacks when provoked, causing even more destruction.
But you might be thinking, -1, he's so small he wouldn't hurt a fly.
Well, let me tell you this. -1 being small allows for more personal moments of terror, as this Godzilla actually feels more hostile in the smaller form.
There's this Jaws-esque like scene in the movie where Godzilla chases down a small sea vessel, and that scene is actually kinda scary. I mean, the music also helps, but the scene itself is kinda terrifying.
One of the best scenes in the whole movie, if you ask me.
If he was too big, it'd be kind of odd if he was going after such a small boat. However, he's just the right size to notice the boat as a legitimate target.
One thing I did forget to mention about the Monsterverse earlier, though, is that Skull Island uses its monsters in a similar fashion, as they are direct threats to individual humans. But of course, Godzilla is supposed to represent larger concepts than just any old monster, so he can't be too small and too personal. But I think -1 strikes a good balance.
Like, he's not able to just wipe out an entire city, although he does come kind of close. When he launches his beam, it creates a massive large-scale explosion that levels a large portion of the city. He didn't go after anyone specifically, he just wanted to eliminate any of his enemies, just so happens to vaporize thousands of people.
Another movie that does a pretty good job with the scaling is Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, where we have a scene where the humans are attempting to attack Godzilla with rocket launchers, and he's small enough that they can target his ankles or whatever, but he's also too big to really be hurt by them. There are other examples, of course, but you get the idea. Specifically, most of these tend to be around the 2000s-ish era, as that's the only other time Toho significantly sized down their Godzilla.
So while there are a variety of ways to depict Godzilla, -1's size is perfect for this film.
Now let's talk about another aspect of the rule that bigger isn't always better. The monies.
Just because you're putting more money into your movie doesn't mean you're going to, make money back. Especially post-COVID. Many movies have unfortunately flopped this year at the box office for, well, various reasons, but most because they're putting too much into it.
Godzilla vs. Kong learned from the massive budget that King of the Monsters had, which I believe was over $200 million. That said, the budget was still pretty large.
Monsterverse movies tend to have really good visual effects with massive teams working on each project, so 150 million plus is a must, I guess?
Or is it? -1 definitely had a smaller budget, but it utilized its smaller budget quite well.
And an even better example of using a small budget for a feature-length film is Shin Godzilla, that only used about 10 to 50 million US. And a good deal of the CGI in the movie looks really, really good.
We're not sure yet what the budget of -1 is, although people guess that it's around $10 to $35 million, somewhere in there.
I guess we'll never know.
While it's all well and good to sing the praises of lower budgets, the ability for Toho to make these movies for such a low cost is due to the low pay of Japanese film crews. They don't get paid much.
I can't eat! I'm broke!
-1, in our opinion, is a great movie, and it easily should have taken more money to make than it did, if only so that the crew can get paid what they're worth. It doesn't need to use a ton more moolah, but it could use something closer to 40, maybe 60 million. Does that allow for more pay for a lot of the workers, and extra money to spend finishing up the CGI? Because the CGI in the Monsterverse is generally finer and more consistent and has a lot more detail, -1 did lack a bit in the texture of the Godzilla model. So just a little bit thrown at that, and I think it would be mwah, chef's kiss.
Now, we were originally going to go talk about how -1 fixed the biggest problem in kaiju films, that being pretty lame human stories. But we have a decent amount to say on that subject, so we're going to save that for another video.
Until then, hopefully we've communicated our thoughts so that Godzilla -1 is a good direction for Toho to be heading.
But we hope you enjoyed, and we hope that you'll subscribe because we're making more interesting videos in the future, very soon.
Including a breakdown of the utter failure that was 2023's The Marvels.
But until that video comes out, click this video over here, as we think that you might find it kinda interesting. And until we see you there, he's Detective Mio.
And he's Inspector Keto.
And we hope that you have a blessed day.
Bye!